Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel Creamy Code. I'm Palvinder Kaur and I aim to make you fall in love with coding on my channel. So let's get started. In last lecture we discussed how events and callback functions are very important in Node.js. So we will discuss some more methods related to events in more detail today. So let's get started. So we will start with how we can create various listeners in events and how we can link many listeners to a particular event. So here you can see I have already created few listeners, and before that I have imported this library that is related to events, and then I have created one event emitter also. So these two listeners I have created, and what I can do is first I will link these listeners to an event and then we will proceed further. So I will just add this. This is my emitter, and I can add listener to an event using two methods. One is on. I think we already discussed it in last lecture. So I will link this first listener to this event. Okay, and another method is add listener. Very straightforward. So and so this is my second listener that I have attached to this event. So if you want to count these listeners, like how many listeners are there in this, we can count it using this method events already, and then event emitter, which is this, and then listener count. This is inbuilt method that we will use to count the listeners of event. And we will print this var means list count. Okay. So we'll run this code. Method underscore one. This is our file name, and we will execute it. We are just checking how many listeners are linked to this event. Okay, there is something wrong. Listener count. Something is wrong. Okay. Actually, we need to directly call this emitter class, not the instance of emitter. Okay, 0. It is saying that there are 0 listeners. Okay. Here we actually made some mistake. Okay, let's check again. Yeah, now it is telling us like there are 2 listeners. Okay, so how we will fire this event so that these listeners are actually called. So we will now fire this event. Okay, how to fire the event is using emitter, which is for this purpose only that we have created, that it will emit the event. So yeah, we can see that both listeners are called. Okay, now there are a few questions like how many times a single listener can be linked to an event, And can we remove the listeners? Yes, we can add one listener, a single listener, repetitively to an event multiple times. And what is the limit of adding an event? By default, adding a limit of adding listeners to an event is approximately 10. We can increase that limit by using setup maximum listeners, and also we can remove the listeners. But if you have repetitively added many listeners to an event, and if you try to remove one listener from that event, only one listener will be removed, not the rest of them. You have to remove each listener turn by turn so that all the listeners are removed. So we will now see like how we can like add this listener remove method. Okay, we'll clear the terminal and I want to remove this listener. You can remove all listeners also, but I will just right now I will remove this listener which is even listen. And also we need to mention from which event we are removing this listener. Okay. So we will remove this and we will check what is the output now when we ask it like how many listeners are left. Only one listener is left and that is also emitted. And what if we don't want the listener to be attached to the emitter forever, like it executes once and go away? There is a method for the same, that is once. Like you want a listener to be added only once. So we will just and listen to only. Like let's add this method only and we will execute. Yeah, we saw that it is saying that it has only two listeners. Okay, one listener and two listener, and we have already removed one of the listeners. There were total actually three listeners. Okay, but this listener, as soon as it attached, it got removed also. Okay, and before emitting, so we don't know actually which listener was one that was emitted and which was not. There is some ambiguity here, so we can try to maybe create one more listener and add. But yeah, so this listener is only occurring once, and it is once it is fired it will go away. So this listener is being fired and go away, but we have already removed this listener, so we are not sure whether this listener is removed or that. So yeah. So there is one more topic that is to be discussed here is if we create an array of listeners and then add to it, what happens? So for that I have already created one file. Okay, so this is it. I'll just remove this extra code that is there so that there is less ambiguity. Okay, so if I want to suppose enter maximum, if we want to test like what is the maximum limit of adding arrays, like we know that the default limit is 10 listeners that we can add. So we will see is it true or not. Okay, so what we are doing is we are creating one array in node, we do it, and then using this array we are adding various listeners. And in this, like I have created one loop, and this loop will create listener, and for each listener it will keep on adding this function listener. And this log console.log I plus event means this function is one function only, and which is assigned to different listen variables. Okay, and so this is add listener, which is being each listener will be added to this event. Okay, And so yeah, so this is listener count we are counting, and this is the we are printing the count, and here we are firing the event. And I am also removing the extra code from here. Then we again try to remove listener from this array, and we will see what is the count left. Okay, so that's it. We are going to do this one. Okay. So it is saying, okay, we are executing a wrong file actually. Let me do this. Okay. So it is saying that 9 listeners are there because we have actually removed one listener. So total 10 listeners are there before removing this listener. And so after removal, it is saying that 9 listeners are there. And it is actually giving a 10 event here because only listener function is only one. Okay. And it is initiated only when the like node initiate all the variables when it is starting, and after that it waits for the thread to fire the event, and after firing of event listener is called, and at that step I is at a point when I is at a last value. So listener is only one only. Okay. So final listener will have a final value of I, that is 10. So we are seeing that all the listeners are created with 10 value event. Okay. And that listener is being added here. So if I try to add, if we comment this line, how many listeners are there after removal? So we will, and we can do this also. First I will clear it terminal. Okay, so we can see that 11 listeners, 10 listeners are there, and we know that that is also the limit. Okay, now we will see if we increase this, what happens. So we will see, like if we increase the number of listeners to 11, what will happen. So it is giving the warning that max listener exceeded warning, possible event emitter memory leak detected, 11 event 1 listeners added. Use emitter set max listeners to increase the limit. So we are not allowed to use 11 listeners. For that we need to set the limit. Okay, that is what we are doing now, and we will clear the screen and we will check. Yeah, it is peaceful now. We can add. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a nice day. See you again. Bye bye.